Welcome to the True North Compliance Podcast, where we discuss regulatory and compliance issues for Canadian business.
Hello, I'm Sean O'Hara, and thanks for listening. My guest today is John Treleaven, who has spent 32 years in the Canadian Forest Service, working abroad and in Ottawa in a variety of positions with a trade and economic focus. As Trade Commissioner, he served the Canadian business community in Sao Paulo, San Juan, London, Puerto Rico, San Jose, Costa Rica, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Manila, and Ottawa. In 1997, he was appointed Canada's ambassador to the Philippines. In Ottawa, he served in a variety of senior positions with a focus on Asia, the policy direction of the Trade Commission Service, and on assignment to the Privy Council Office Job Strategy Task Force. In 2000, he left the Foreign Service to join the Saskatchewan Trade and Export Partnership with the letters STEP as president and CEO. STEP is a public-private partnership providing international trade services to over 250 Canadian exporting companies. As principal of the Sydney-based Treleaven Consulting Group, John continued to deliver international business solutions to a range of private and public sector clients across Canada and abroad between 2005 and 2018. He was a director of a number of internationally focused Canadian organizations, including the Forum for International Trade Training, the Hong Kong Canada Business Association, the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. He is past chair of the board of Mercy Ships Canada and chair of the board of Grumpy Taxpayers of Greater Victoria. He has received numerous awards, including an honorary doctorate in humanities from the University of Baguio in the Philippines, the Queen's Jubilee Medal, and the Saskatchewan Centennial Medal. Welcome, John. That's a very impressive background and history.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the invitation to join the conversation today.
So thank you for that background. What really interests me today is the Grumpy Taxpayers and what inspired you to start this organization.
Okay, well, to tie everything together, I've spent most of my career working with Canadian companies seeking to expand their opportunities abroad. So I had a pretty broad understanding of the challenges they face as international trade participants or would-be participants. When I worked at the Saskatchewan Trade and Export Partnership, I, of course, became aware of the role that provinces play in creating an environment in which businesses can take risk for their shareholders and employees and serve the needs of customers around the world. But when I retired from that and we moved here in 2005 and I joined the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, I became acutely aware and duped very quickly of the role that municipal governments have to play in the success or failure of businesses. All business transactions happen at the municipal level. And therefore, the issue of the business friendliness of municipalities has a direct impact on the prosperity of provinces and a significant impact on the prosperity of this country as an international trading nation. Don't forget, more than half of our GDP is generated either importing or exporting products from Canada. And of course, we're in a trade war. We are vulnerable. If I can have an aside, people are a little bit concerned that we're shipping too much to the United States. We're too dependent on them. That's the wrong language. Canadian export companies have been extremely successful in the United States. That's a good thing. If we are to move away from that, to diversify our trade, only customers will diversify Canadian trade. And all the diversification efforts will be rooted in their municipalities. I mean, in the IP of the company and the employees of the company and whatnot, but the business environment at the municipal level. So that brings us to the Grumpy Taxpayers of Greater Victoria. And with the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, I spent a very long time working particularly with the North Saanich, Central Saanich, and Sydney on the issue of business friendliness. So exactly what happened was 11, 12 years ago, the board of the CRD voted itself 100% pay increase in the first session of a new term. We felt that they should have done that in the last meeting of the previous term before the election. And we thought that that was rather manipulative and should be challenged. A group of us were sitting around saying, well, what's going on here? And at that moment, we formed the Grumpy Taxpayers of Greater Victoria, not as a lobby group. We are nonpartisan. We just want these 13 municipal governments to succeed in all of their dreams, but with transparency, accountability, and the understanding that they are custodians, not just of municipal services, but they are custodians of the economy of British Columbia. If you take all 161 right across the province. And what we have been advocating, asking questions about are issues of transparency and accountability, which matter to taxpayers. We are not against, of course, paying taxes, but we're very concerned when taxpayers' dollars are wasted, where they are, the impact is hidden, where tax monies are diverted for, let's say, non-municipal causes on occasion. And that inevitably, of course, brought us into the discussion, not of amalgamation, political amalgamation, but of service coherence across this city of 460,000 people with 13 sovereign municipal governments. And we've been asking questions, publishing. We do publish a newsletter. My friend and colleague Stan Barton, past chair, is a prolific writer. And from time to time, I do interviews. And what we're really doing is asking questions. Why are there 18 fire chiefs? There's no city in the world of 460,000 people with 18 fire chiefs. Zero. At another level, you could say, as I've already mentioned, the economy of British Columbia happens every day in the municipalities. And the accumulation of that activity becomes the provincial economy. Well, no. There are two major cities in Canada that have no mayor. Metro Vancouver, a city of 3 million plus or 2.8 million, has no mayor. And Greater Victoria, a city of 460,000 people, has no mayor. No regional elections. Nobody stands for election and says, here is where this region, here's where I want to take the region. Here are the main regional issues I want to deal with. And in the end, that amount of fractured governance puts an inordinate tax burden on the taxpayers and creates an environment in which it's a little more difficult for businesses to establish and flourish than it otherwise might. That's where it all comes together. And as I say, we are nonpartisan. Absolutely. We've had a number of successes. And if you're in the business of seeking to influence public policy, it's not a football game. It doesn't end after the fourth quarter. And you can't always track the progress of the ball, if you use that analogy, down the field as you can in a football game. But it's been an interesting journey. We're about to enter our 12th year. We've been tremendous reaction. I think people, realize we're not out to any. Well, we're totally nonpartisan. That's why I keep stressing that. And when we started, after a round of golf, actually at Cordova Bay Golf, just after the board of the CRD had given themselves 100% pay increase in the first meeting of the new year, we had no idea how many coconuts would fall from the palm trees in our path that we would have to be obliged to pick up and run with for a while. Well, the coconuts keep falling, and we spend a lot of time thinking about how could it be better. Maybe a city of 460,000 people is harmed when there are 5 police forces, and it is. Perhaps businesses have a hard time growing from a small neighborhood municipality across the city, never mind across the province. Anyway, that's the kind of consideration. But basically, transparency, accountability, and value for money for taxpayers.
Is amalgamation a strong discussion, considering the police forces and the fire departments?
Well, service integration, we discuss a lot. Amalgamation, of course, it is happening. I mean, I think 3 election cycles ago, in each of the 13 municipalities, a slightly different question was asked around the issue of studying the implications of amalgamation. And in all municipalities, that vote was in favor of a study. Well, like so many other reports and initiatives that had to do with growing this community together, those results have been largely ignored, except, of course, in Victoria and Saanich, who are going through a very interesting process. Very interesting. The Citizens' Assembly, I think 48 citizens chosen randomly from both municipalities have done a masterful job, really, of doing study and bringing, and they've recommended amalgamation. And the further processes will continue. But we wrote a submission to the Citizens' Assembly, and our submission was entitled "The Power of the Apostrophe," because this is not just an assembly of citizens. This is a citizens' assembly in which the citizens own it. And so for a brief moment, the elected councils of Victoria and Saanich have to listen to the assembly of citizens. I mean, it's a very interesting legislative process that the province has put together for that mechanism. And in our brief, again, we're very nonpartisan. All we suggested to the community deserves should be thanking and are thanking the 48 people involved. We suggested they be bold. This is a time for 48 citizens from across those 2 municipalities, but together they represent 210,000 people, something like that, to get down to brass tacks and have a real impact. It will be interesting to see how the process continues. Other than feeding into that Citizens' Assembly process, obviously, amalgamation, yes, has been around for years, has done a wonderful job of advocating on behalf of that issue. But services are extremely important to a municipality. When Mike Harris really forcefully created the Greater Toronto area, 70% of municipal services were already uniform across that region. 70%. Because the voters in all the metropolitan districts had concluded that, well, we only need 1 police force. We don't need 10 ambulance forces and all that. Whereas here, there's great resistance to even consider service integration. And one of our focuses has been that. Let the politicians do what they'd like to do, but good grief, we don't need 5 police forces. Anyway, it's been that lens through which we've looked at that, and but more generally, just transparency, accountability.
What we run into with that duplication is a police chase example, and it makes the news frequently enough here. An incident happens, say, in Langford, and the person eventually makes it into Oak Bay, and each of those police forces along the way have to be notified, either do something or not, because the police force from one doesn't have the jurisdiction to go right through.
My wife and I had moved to Sydney at the time the Lee family died in a knife attack in Oak Bay. And what happened was there was a 911 call made from that house that there was a problem, there was an attack underway. And it was in the evening, and the Oak Bay police officer on duty was attending to other duties. And so the call went, I think, to Saanich. And eventually Victoria Police joined. And then at about 3 a.m, the Oak Bay police cruiser came down. Picture this. There are cruisers in front of that house. There's been a 911 call. They sat there until 7 a.m, trying to decide which police force of the 3 was responsible for that incident. The family bled to death. And by the way, that story is absolutely true. I've heard it twice now from the former chief of police of Victoria. There's more to this fractured governance than simply, we each like to design our parks a different way. It's very serious. And from the business perspective, you need predictability and consistency that encourage you to risk the capital to establish your business and to grow it. And the fractional governance model is not optimal. Let's put it that.
So getting back to the public safety part, even before you moved here, one of our rare bad snowstorms, I'm in the West Shore area, and one of the municipalities completely paved their roads, the other didn't, and people were driving down the road like they normally do and crashing into a snowbank.
Is this 96?
Could have been.
Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
big snowstorm. Oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
my wife has relatives here, and they were trapped in their house.
Right.
Well, the story of that one is when I was with the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, I arranged the first tour of industry, which we do every year, give people a chance to understand how their municipalities earn a living. And what happened was that was a terrible storm, and Viking Aviation at the time was in its old wooden hangar, which collapsed. And the mayor of Central Saanich at the time admitted publicly that, because they asked in an interview, did you hear what happened to Viking here? Their whole building collapsed. The mayor of Central Saanich at the time said publicly, I never understood what they did. Excuse me, major employer in the neighborhood, and they've just lost everything, and you're the mayor and you don't understand what they did? Anyway, that kind of neighborhood governance model is not for the larger economy. And the larger economy is one of the largest cities in Canada, which, by the way, does not sit the table in the Federation of Canadian Municipalities of large municipalities, because we're 13. We're not one. And that's another story.
Oh, we're all too small.
Yeah.
Okay.
But together, we're one of the largest cities in Canada. The table of big city mayors meets quite regularly with the federal minister of finance on little issues like infrastructure. We're not there.
Mm-hmm. And we have the CRD, the Capital Regional District, and they are appointed by the municipalities.
Well, yeah, their members are made up of people elected through the municipality, but they themselves don't get a chance to vote for anybody at the CRD level. Anyway, there's all sorts of. We live in one of the best places on earth. There's absolutely no question about it. This is a beautiful city, the province, the country. We're privileged. Our concern as grumpy taxpayers, we could be so much better, so much better. We're not knocking Victoria at all. It's a lovely place to live, but it could be a lot better fairly easily.
Yeah, this is paradise. I like what you said about that all business is at the municipal level. So even if they're strictly exporting, or if they're a tech business that does no business locally, they still actually, even if they've got remote workers who happen to require licensing, they're still regulated by a municipality.
Yeah. And I think the ideal situation for any municipality, large or small, is for the business community, the members of it, to be wandering around telling each other stories about how wonderful City Hall was to them. Terrific. Had a problem? They solved it. Well, I know that happens, all that freaking. And now this is partly, this is mostly me, not grumpy taxpayers, but what people don't seem to understand is that only people pay taxes. Businesses never pay tax under any circumstances. Only at the time of bankruptcy, if God forbid, the accountant says, look, use some of your equity to pay your GST bill. Too many politicians seem to think that there are two taxpayers. There are people, homeowners, and businesses. And of course, there's always a differential at the property tax level between what commercial and industrial land is assessed and what residents are assessed. Well, there's a reason for this. The UBCM, when they did a study on property taxes, pointed out that businesses get to deduct the tax, and that's why the ratio is higher, right? The rates are higher, without explaining why they get to deduct the tax. They get to deduct property taxes because they're paying with revenue that's not part of their business. And it just seems to me that our tax policy generally would be more conducive to the establishment and growth of business if governments at all levels understood that businesses are wealth generators and tax collectors, and people are taxpayers. taxes have to come. There's no question. But there are too many examples. Well, the highest ratio of property taxes on commercial industrial land in the province of British Columbia are in North Saanich, highest in the province of the 161 municipalities. What's in North Saanich? An airport. You and I pay that tax every time we use the airport. Did I mention BC Ferries? And there are brilliant businesses around the airport that, you go back to what you just said, many of whom have no domestic customers, but employ several thousand people, creating value for customers all over the world. I don't quite understand why the folks in North Saanich aren't exceedingly proud of being the hosts to companies that produce about, well, a little bit more than half of everything manufactured in this whole region, in the whole regional district. Anyway, it's important because the municipalities have a huge role to play in the prosperity of all of us. Therefore, the hospital services, the education services, the public services generally. And as Grumpy Taxpayers, all we are seeking is an open and transparent governance model that makes sense for taxpayers, makes sense for those who step into the public square and the employees who serve those needs, and that is responsive to the needs of a community.
People also feel that businesses should be taxed, should pay their fair share, or just tax the business.
Yeah, well, but they should realize that businesses never pay a tax.
Yeah,
the money has to come from their customers.
Hmm.
The customers become customers because the value the business creates for the customers, the value the employees create, the value the shareholders create. And now, of course, businesses spin off a lot of taxes through their employees, dividends. Oh, yes. But as a business, which is, well, I'll tell you, years and years ago, I was at a conference in Toronto run by the Canadian Manufacturers Association. And the president of the CMA stood up and uttered three sentences that I have used in most speeches, so I'll use it today, Sean, if you don't mind. He stood up and said, governments can't create jobs. All they can do is create programs, raise taxes, hire people to execute the programs. If the tax dollars disappear, the employees are laid off and the programs. Then he said, companies don't create jobs. He said, never in the history of business did the chairman of the board of a company phone the president and say, hire people. Never happened. Only customers create. And that's the real challenge of business, of any business, is to create value to solve a problem a group of potential customers have, who are prepared to pay, of course, more than the solution costs, and the difference is profit. Well, you can take that construct and put it into municipal government. Customers create jobs. People pay taxes. Businesses don't. It all centers on the individual. And I just think that we grumpies don't. We're not into all of that. We're talking about municipal governance, but fundamentally, if more people understood that businesses don't pay taxes, they collect taxes, then what happens here? A municipality comes to their businesses and says, how can we help you get more customers? Maybe repave a road. Maybe, increase the water service or what. But there's all kinds of, huge impact that municipalities have on businesses, on all of us, frankly. It is the most important level of government. It really is. And among other things, we salute everyone who enters the public square at the municipal level, because they are going to be faced with issues that are way beyond their ability to control, but are apparent to everybody in town on the streets every day, and they don't have to go through them. It's a very difficult situation for municipalities, maybe particularly these days. So I salute the efforts of anybody who steps into that, and we have some very fine municipal public servants, should say municipal politicians, great public servants as well, of course, who tackle problems every day that impact all of us very directly, but do not have the let's say constitutional authority or the financial ability to actually solve. They only have the ability to handle, and that's very difficult. going back to the point that the whole economy of British Columbia, the economy of Canada, is created at the municipal level. I was on the board of the Saanich Peninsula Chamber, and the newly elected mayor of Sydney was speaking to what became the Sydney Breakfast Club where you and I met years ago. And Larry Cross was the mayor, and so I went to it at the Dakota. And I knew Larry because he had been our councillor liaison to the chamber board. Anyway, he gave a very good presentation, a very fine public servant. And afterwards, I went over to him and I said, Larry, when councils are newly elected, do they ever take a tour of their communities? Well, no, because they're all from the community. Like, why would they have to take a tour? But I said, like, does everybody on council today understand how, let's say, Sydney or the peninsula we were talking earns a living? We organized the first Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce tour of industry. We went to the 9 businesses. We had most of the councils from the 3 municipalities, and we had the 3 mayors. It was quite fascinating. No names, but the mayor of one of those municipalities came out of a family-oriented, family-run, family-owned, fully manufacturing business, completely state-of-the-art, serving the needs of the local market. And he turned and said, I never knew what they did. He had been mayor for 3 terms. This was a business in a small town in his town. The containers show up in the morning and they leave in the evening. I mean, just ridiculous. From then on, the chamber has organized tours of industry for municipal leaders, and until COVID hit and all that, we now have a bus. We get about 90 people or 60 people running around figuring out how the economy works at the municipal level. There was that level of dissonance. Business is there, people are here. No. It's got to be more holistic. And I think we have over time in the peninsula, people understand that.
Yeah, I have been on that tour.
Oh.
Yeah, very valuable. Yes. So 3 terms, that would be 9 years at that time, and not knowing everything that's going on. Yeah. And so people have that view that business, for example, getting to tax, they should pay tax, except if they can have an environment where they're making money and they're able to pay their people so that they can be invested in the community. And I don't mean part-time, I mean real, so that they can buy, because a house here can be $1 million. If they can live close to where they work, if they can buy that property, be invested, live here, stay here, that benefits the whole, spend their money, go out to eat, go shopping, that benefits the whole community.
Yeah, well, I'll drop another one on you if you don't mind. Listen, I took history in grade 13. I took history in university. I took Latin in grade 13. So math is not one of my big skills. But over the years thinking about it, I believe that all new net tax dollars are triggered only by business transactions. There's all kinds of repeat triggers, right? Through an economy, through society. Net new dollars only get created by business transactions. And municipalities are where most of those transactions happen. And so we need and have very good municipal leaders and extremely capable public servants working at the municipal level, but we need to do more. We aren't the Fraser Institute. We don't have, a bunch of economists on speed dial. But when stuff doesn't make sense, we ask a question. When the CRD years ago went in camera to create a conditional expression of support for the Pan Am Games, I think it was David Black was advocating. We asked how they could make that statement of support in camera. We asked for the material they used to reach a decision. Now, this was a decision to set aside, offer a conditional $30 million from the region to the project. So we asked for material they used to reach that decision. We felt it was improper because that's taxpayers' dollars. We felt it was improper to be discussed in camera. They sent us 130 pages of material, Sean, fully redacted. Who do they work for? We took that to the ombudsman. The ombudsman's office said, well, the decision was taken actually to withdraw the application for the games, and so we won't pursue the investigation. But about a week later, we got another note saying, no, we're going to take a look, because we were not complaining about the games. It was the use of in-camera. It was the governance around the decision. And the Ombudsman's office issued a stinging report criticizing the CRD that they would have gone in camera to discuss even a possible $30 million grant. And, there have been other things. There's the Langford Rec Center. There was a letter of comfort for the private sector group that was putting the center together. It's a wonderful center. Letter of comfort from Langford Town Hall. That called upon the board of the organization whose building would operate the center to report finances to the town of Langford every 6 months, which it never did. And so the current Langford Council was suddenly left with 48 hours to decide what to do with this multi-million-dollar facility, and they've had to purchase it, as you know, for $31 million. Well, our concern was, okay, we can't accept that the proponents who built this one center didn't comply with the terms of the letter of comfort from Langford. We can't accept that. But what we're really pissed off about was that Langford City Hall never asked for a financial statement, and they're due one every 6 months. I come back to Sydney, and the Mary Winspear Center had lost 2 charitable licenses because during COVID, they didn't submit the necessary financials to the CRA. And the Municipal Sydney and North Saanich both provide funding to the Mary Winspear Center, which is a wonderful facility. I'm not criticizing it. Anyway, I stood up in a council meeting in Sydney, and I asked to see the funding agreement between the town of Sydney and the Mary Winspear Center. They received 3% of our property taxes. To be told they didn't have one. They're transferring millions of taxpayers' dollars. There's nothing hostile. You have to at least have the funding agreement. And my point was very simple. The funding agreement would be really easy. On April 1st, you'll get your money, provided we get a letter from the chairman of the board saying that you're compliant with federal, provincial, and municipal regulations. If that funding agreement had been there, the Mary Winspear Center would not have submitted the necessary financials to the CRA. So that's the kind of, I would say, governance gap or compliance gap. I don't know how you want that it should not happen. And Grumpy Taxpayers, we're about where there are those gaps, they got to be fixed. And I mean, I can't tell you how shocked I was that the town of Sydney very well administered everything else. I know them all well. It never had a funding agreement. I was in the federal government. I mean, there may have been overcompliance with grants and stuff from the federal government, but nobody ever got $1 without signing a contract of compliance.
It's neat. I have so many more questions, but I'll have to have you back.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
My last question is, where can people find out more about you and about the Grumpy Taxpayers and also the newsletter you mentioned?
Yes, well, we have a website, grumpytaxpayers.com. We're on X, and for all of its controversy, the truth is that no platform is as extensively distributed as X. On Facebook, and we've got about 300 members. Member is an individual that makes a donation. By the way, we're not a charity, so we don't issue tax receipt, but makes a donation every year. They become a member. We have about 300 of those, and our newsletter goes to probably 1,300 people around the region. I will say this, that our newsletter is read one way or another by almost every municipal leader in this region. So it's good, well distributed. And we'd welcome interest from anyone, for sure. This is our community. We just want to make it better, as do they, if they, well, they do. They live here. They're raising their families here. And we have monthly board meetings. They're open to everybody. We discuss issues and figure out, are we going to write a letter to the Times Caller as to, will I get onto CFAX and say something or whatever, right? And I should say that as time goes on, we may at some stage look at a stronger presence in social media, but frankly, between you and John Treleaven, the Victoria Rumble Room, there's no need for us to get into the YouTube world. I think that you guys do a great job.
Well, thank you. My guest today has been John Treleaven, and thank you so much, and we'll have to have you back.
Be a pleasure. Best of luck on everything you're doing to encourage educated and continuous dialogue in the community.
And that's a wrap.